When you think of an Orson Welles movie, everyone instinctively goes to Citizen Kane. It's the movie everyone widely agrees to be the greatest movie of all time. Most, if not every movie today, owes its depth to Citizen Kane. The way it uses cinematography and plot structure was revolutionary for cinema when it came out in 1941, and even 85 years after the film came out, people are still raving about it. But that is usually all you hear about Orson Welles when it comes to his greatness. Most people talk about him as a filmmaker who lost his way to the Hollywood system, as his second film, The Magnificent Ambersons, was greatly cut down in editing by the studio without Welles' knowledge. And after that, it was either him making a studio film where he didn't get final cut, or an independent film that he had to fight tooth and nail to get funding for. For example, the production of his 1951 adaptation of Othello lasted 3 years because Welles was constantly running out of money during production. Or his production of Macbeth, where he had to shoot on sets that were built for Western movies because the low budget wouldn't allow him to build any sets specifically for the film. By the 1960s, his career was basically kind of at a dead end. The movie he made in 1958, Touch of Evil, was panned by critics when it came out, and no Hollywood system wanted to touch him after that. So he went back to Europe to try and get funding for his next movie. He eventually decided to adapt the Franz Kafka novel, The Trial, and honestly, it was the perfect book for Welles to adapt. It felt like all the years where he was just put under by the studios and ridiculed by everyone was put front and center in this movie, and honestly, this is my favorite work ever done by Orson Welles. Where do I begin with The Trial? The movie is about a man who wakes up one day and is told by officers that he is being arrested for a crime that he never did. And it's not like he is being framed for murder or there is some kind of fraud at his workplace that is happening. No, the police never specify what he is specifically being charged with. He also doesn't get arrested in a typical way, he doesn't even go to jail, but he is constantly being monitored and followed by people who again never clarify why he is being charged. And honestly, that concept alone is horrifying. The fact that you can literally get arrested for doing nothing, that is a horrifying thing that everyone fears, and is unfortunately kind of true in some countries. A lot of typical Welles' trademarks are in this film. First, I want to talk about the structure of this film. From the very beginning, the movie already makes this huge statement by not starting with the plot immediately. Instead, it begins with a story read by Welles himself, and at the end of the story, he says to the audience that this movie is not meant to be taken literally. Instead, it's to be interpreted like a nightmare. And that is already something that makes this film unique. The movie itself feels like it goes from place to place without any real logic or explanation. There are so many events that happen in the movie that you feel like you're not sure why it happened. But what makes it work in this movie is that the world is already established to be this nightmarish world where anything can happen to anyone. That does not mean that the movie does not have to make sense though. The movie itself is very aware of the nightmare nature, and by the end of the movie you start to fully understand the world and how everything works in this movie, especially with the main character of Joseph K. Played by the wonderful Anthony Perkins, K is a character who, despite having this horrific event placed on him, in typical Kafka fashion, he seems to be only concerned with one thing: getting to work on time. A great way to describe his character is that he constantly puts himself in scenarios that make him look bad. It almost comes across as if he doesn't see this trial as a big deal, mainly because he just doesn't know what he's being charged with, and maybe he thinks he'll be set free, and this whole thing was just a misunderstanding. But he never gets the peace he truly desires. From the very beginning, his apartment is broken into by feds, who are there to apparently arrest him for something. But what the feds do is that they go around the room and start pointing out things that don't look like they are worthy to talk about. But they only say that it makes K's case look bad. Even a slight slip of the tongue from K is enough to get him into more trouble.
That's my pornograph. My phone. What's this?
But this constant spying and madness happens to him throughout the entire film. It feels like everyone is out to criticize or spy on K, or they are there to make K question his surroundings. This goes into the production design. Most of the production design in The Trial doesn't make sense at all. Like, look at the office that K works at. It looks off. First of all, K's office is out in the open and not covered by any walls, which makes him feel out in the open with all eyes on him. It also looks like the walls don't connect to the ceiling, and there's a random closet where the feds who visited him are getting whipped. Or let's take a look at the scene where K goes to the room full of accused people and discovers a whole labyrinth of sets and places that seemingly go on forever until he all of a sudden just appears outside. It doesn't feel like he just exited the place, it feels like he just appeared outside. It's weird, nothing feels comfortable or grounded in reality, which mirrors the paranoia and anxiety that the protagonist experiences throughout the story. Instead of creating realistic environments, the production design turns the whole world into a nightmare that constantly feels unstable and oppressive. Every location looks like it exists outside of normal human understanding, making the audience feel trapped inside the same bizarre system that is destroying the main character. One of the most fascinating aspects about the trial is how Orson Welles used filming locations. He filmed a lot of scenes across Europe. He mainly filmed in Zagreb, Croatia, where the office, cathedral, and apartment scenes were shot. But due to budget constraints, he had to film in the abandoned Gare d'Orsay train station in Paris as a major filming location. Instead of hiding the emptiness and bleak look of the massive building, Welles embraces it completely, turning the station into a surreal landscape that feels detached from reality. The enormous open spaces make the characters look tiny and insignificant, reinforcing the idea that Joseph K is trapped inside a system far larger than himself. At the same time, the station still carries traces of its original purpose, which creates a strange feeling that the world of the film was once functional but has now decayed into something cold and bureaucratic. The unfinished and industrial look of the location gives many scenes a dreamlike quality, almost as if the characters are wandering through the ruins of civilization itself. Welles also uses the station's gigantic ceilings, endless corridors, and harsh lighting to create visual depth that makes the environment feel endless and impossible to escape. The location becomes more than just a backdrop. It feels like a physical manifestation of Joseph K's anxieties and confusion, constantly swallowing him within its overwhelming scale. The cinematography in the trial is one of the main reasons the film feels so unsettling and nightmarish. Orson Welles uses extreme shadows, unusual camera angles, and massive wide shots to make the world feel distorted and overwhelming. Characters are often framed to look tiny compared to the enormous environments around them, emphasizing how powerless they are within the strange bureaucratic system of the film. The lighting constantly shifts between harsh brightness and deep darkness, creating an atmosphere that feels both theatrical and claustrophobic at the same time. Many shots linger longer than expected or move in strange ways, giving scenes an uncomfortable rhythm that adds to the paranoia. The camera itself almost feels like another character, constantly observing and trapping the protagonist as he struggles to understand the bizarre world around him. I remember one specific shot in the trial where it is basically an entire scene where Kay is talking to a woman, and the woman is just belittling Kay and refusing his help carrying a suitcase, and the shot goes on for at least 3 to 4 minutes. This isn't the first time Welles used lawn shots. He's been doing that his entire career, but this one I found interesting because of how it just lingers on the characters from a distance, without being so flashy. But my personal favorite piece of cinematography in the entire film is the scene where he is being chased by all these girls who think that he is some celebrity. The harsh shadows, the set design, and the crazy lighting just makes this scene work in so many cool ways. And that's just a taste of the cinematography, because the rest of the cinematography in this movie is magnificent, some of the best I've ever seen. One of the most unique things about the trial is how it turns bureaucracy itself into a form of horror. There is never a clear monster or villain chasing Kay, yet the systems surrounding him feel more terrifying than any physical threat. The courts, offices, paperwork, and endless procedures all operate according to rules that nobody can fully explain, creating a world where logic no longer provides safety. Every time Kay tries to get answers, he is sent to another room, another official, or another confusing conversation that only makes his situation worse. The horror comes from the feeling that the system is infinite and impossible to fight because it exists everywhere at once. Even the people working within it seem trapped by it, carrying out meaningless tasks without understanding the larger purpose. Welles emphasizes this fear visually by filling rooms with endless rows of desks, cramped offices, and crowds of people who all blend together into one overwhelming machine. The film suggests that bureaucracy becomes horrifying when it strips away individuality and humanity, reducing people to files, accusations, and procedures instead of treating them like real human beings. This goes into the character that Orson Welles plays himself, the character known as the Advocate. He is a figure who is both charismatic and deeply intimidating. Even though he appears for a relatively short portion of the film, his presence completely dominates every scene he is in. Welles gives the character a theatrical, almost godlike quality, speaking with confidence while surrounded by dark shadows and cluttered spaces that make him seem larger than life. The Advocate represents another layer of the corrupt and incomprehensible system trapped in Joseph K, because he pretends to offer help while actually keeping people dependent on him. His conversations are filled with vague answers and manipulative wisdom, making it unclear whether he truly understands the system himself or is simply another part of the machine. Welles' performance adds to the film's overwhelming atmosphere because he turns the character into someone who feels impossible to fully trust or understand, which perfectly fits the nightmare logic of the film. The ending of the trial is one of the most haunting parts of the entire film because it feels both sudden and inevitable. After spending the movie desperately trying to understand the accusations against him, Kay ultimately reaches the point where resistance seems meaningless. The final sequence strips away any hope that the legal system can be reasoned with or escaped from, reinforcing the film's central idea that the bureaucracy surrounding him is completely indifferent to human life. Which makes the ending especially disturbing is how emotionally exhausted Kay has become by that point. The system has psychologically broken him long before his fate is sealed. The massive blast at the end feels almost apocalyptic, as if the entire nightmare world is collapsing in on itself. Welles reportedly disliked the idea of Joseph Kay dying passively, so his version gives the ending a more defiant and angry energy, even if it still ends in destruction. The result is an ending that feels less like a quiet defeat and more like a violent final moment of a system consuming itself. Even though the film was not a major commercial success when it first released, its style and atmosphere inspired countless filmmakers who wanted to portray paranoia, oppressive systems, and dreamlike realities. The movie's massive industrial spaces, harsh shadows, and confusing bureaucratic environments I can see being echoed in dystopian films like Brazil, Blade Runner, and even Dark City. Welles showed that a film could feel emotionally truthful without following normal realism, which helped pave the way for more experimental storytelling in mainstream cinema. The movie also became one of the defining cinematic inspirations of Kafka's ideas, helping popularize the term Kafkaesque in film criticism to describe stories about alienation, absurd systems, and existential dread. Today, the film is often studied not only as an adaptation of the trial, but also as one of the clearest examples of how visual style and atmosphere can completely shape a movie's theme. And that is my review of the trial. I hope you all enjoyed this, and please like and subscribe to Film 513. Okay everyone, see you soon.